Alan Lewis Raw Conversation, where every voice has a story.
Welcome to podcast 21. This might be a bit of a long intro because today it means a lot to me to who we're going to be talking to. First, I again want to thank Jacob. Our first podcast with him being producer last week went well, and we got a lot of great comments back from Jacob. So again, Jacob's working with us today. Today, we're going to be talking to paramedic and fire officer in Connecticut, Bernie. Why this interested me so much is one dream of mine was always to be a paramedic, but with my disability being blind, I couldn't do that. But I went into an area in fitness and health where I believed I help people. As well, my passion, I think Bernie might know this show came from a show called Emergency in the early 70s, late 80s, called Emergency, and that interest for paramedic and helping people has always been there. And I'm happy to introduce Bernie. How are you, Bernie?
I'm good. How are you, Alan?
Good. Bernie,
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Just a little bit about
a world away.
We are. I was just going to say that I am on Queensland. Our capital is Brisbane. There's about 5 million people here, just over 5 million people. We've got some of the most beautiful beaches, and we have the Olympics in 2032. The great weather on the Gold Coast, and some of the inlands get very cold. Can you tell us a little bit about your state?
Well, I'm. What are we? 14 time zones away from each other, I believe.
Yeah,
It's New England, so we're just northeast of New York City, about 65 miles northeast of New York City. And being New England, we're famous for the weather changing every 15 minutes. And in fact, thunderstorm just tore through here half an hour ago, and they expect a few more. But all extremes. It was 91 degrees or something today. Very hot and humid, and then then it thunderstormed, and then in the wintertime we get 2 feet of snow sometimes. So it's New England. The leaves change, the leaves fall. So it's probably a little different than where you are.
It sure is. And have you lived there all your life in that area where you are now?
Yeah, I was born in New York City, in Queens, New York, and then my parents moved up to Connecticut. Again, it's the quote unquote country. From New York City, and we live in a small town. I grew up in Newtown, Connecticut, which is where the Sandy Hook School is located, if some of your listeners know that. Yeah. And now I live in rural Roxbury, Ruxbury, Connecticut, which is north of Danbury, between about 2/3 of the way up almost to Massachusetts. Very small town of 2,000 people, nowhere near 5 million, and it must be in Brisbane.
Yeah, well, that's the whole estate, but we keep growing up here. Now, Bernie, I would take you back to a little bit of start. As I said, I've done a little bit of research, and I heard you came a EMT. That's a little bit different here because we don't have EMTs, we just have paramedics. I believe an EMT around the age of 14, 16, and a volunteer fire officer. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. I had a great uncle. My grandmother's brother was killed as a firefighter in New York City generations ago. And I heard her stories, and that kind of captivated me at a very young age. So when we moved to Connecticut, when I was 14, I was able to join what we call here as an explorer post, kind of a scouting group that was involved in EMS. But you couldn't be an EMT, and you still can't be an EMT here till you're 16. So I waited till I was 16, and the local volunteer fire department allowed me to join at 16. And this is before we had all these what would over here call OSHA rules, where underage kids could do things. So I would leave high school literally during the daytime to go to fires and emergencies with a bunch of my pals that were also volunteers. And we were the backbone of the town there for years. They had a kid program, if you want to call it that, and the older guys drove the engines and were the chiefs, and the kids that we were the firefighters. So, and then that went on. I was an EMT for was 6 years, and I went to paramedic school.
Yep.
Paramedic school here is at the community college level,
Yeah.
basically, and I was one of the first paramedics in my area of the state. It was 1983, 84. And again, like you said, motivated by the show Emergency
Yes.
um, from the 70s. I wanted to be like John Gage. I've met Randy Mantooth a couple of times.
Oh my God, what
Uh,
a show it was.
yeah, it was great. And so, um, there I was, 22, became a paramedic, and I wanted to always be a career firefighter. And I took that test about that time as well and got hired on at the end of my 22nd year. And
Yeah.
I just retired from that career after 40 years.
Incredible. Can you tell us a little bit of the difference between EMT? Because we have paramedics over here. I don't believe we have
Okay.
EMTs, but because we see them on, like you said, TV shows where the EMTs come or the paramedics. Can you just tell us a little bit the difference between them and what they do?
Sure. At least in Connecticut and most of the country, the United States goes by what's called National Registry. It's a registry of EMS workers that sets the standards for qualifications. So even lower than the EMT is called emergency medical responder, which is, I
Okay.
think, around 50 hours of training. And most of the police officers in Connecticut are trained to that level. And that gives you CPR and defibrillator, automatic defibrillator, and basic life support sort of things. Then you go on to EMT, which is now, I think, about 200 hours. When I took it in 1978 or whenever it was 65 hours, I think. So they learn a lot. They learn a lot of anatomy and basic life support, CPR, defibrillation, uh, epinephrine for allergic reactions, all sorts of splinting, bleeding control, those sort of things. And the majority of ambulances in the United States are staffed by EMTs.
Okay.
Uh, you have to have two on each ambulance. Out where I live, we're all volunteers. So the radio pager, or our telephone apps go off, and we go and get the ambulance and go to help our neighbors. And then as you move on from EMT, is paramedic level, which is probably about 2,000 hours or so now of training, additional to the EMT. And again, at the excuse me, at the community college level, um, where and then after the didactic end of things, you go into a clinical setting. I did my ride time in Lower Manhattan in New York City.
Okay.
So that was pretty wild back then in the 80s when it wasn't, the city hadn't been really cleaned up yet.
No.
So, but, and the paramedics, what happens, like where I live, one paramedic covers 6 towns, 6 smaller towns. So if somebody is having a heart attack or sick or what have you, um, they alert the local volunteer squad, which is just anyone from any walk of life. And they respond, and then a paramedic is alerted. He's a full timer, and he's stationed at a hospital in the middle of all those towns. And he comes out in a SUV, Tahoe or whatever it is, and assists the volunteers with his advanced training and equipment. And then beyond that, I know I watched some of the YouTubes on the helicopter program in Australia, which is,
Yeah.
I guess, pretty robust. Connecticut, not so robust. Robust. We have 2 helicopters in Connecticut and one just over the border in Massachusetts with one system, and 2 or 3 in New York. And they're really only reserved for really terrible crashes or rural rescues. The weather limits them quite a bit, and the terrain at times. And they're paramedics. They're not. I think the Australian version of those, they're kind of rescue guys.
Yeah. Emergency
They
rescue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they come out of the helicopter and do all sorts of things. Our helicopter team is more trauma surgeon, trauma nurse, paramedic, cardiac technicians, more very advanced life support things. They carry blood and things like that, but they're not going to be the guys that are going to crawl under the rolled over tractor trailer and dig somebody out. That's up to the local guys, and then hand them off to the helicopter crew for transport to a trauma center.
Mm.
There's three divisions of hospitals, at least here in Connecticut, for trauma and for cardiac and those sort of things. So the hospital local to me is not a trauma center. It's a level 3, it has limited capability, and they have
Yeah.
no cardiac lab for catheterization. So the helicopter is often needed to take people to either Hartford or New Haven or down to New York for advanced care.
And it's talking about the remote areas and that, and you would have done it before. Your training must have to come at a high level or understanding when there is going to be a long wait before any more help gets there. And that must be hard at times to, one, help the patient, calm the patient, but be able to treat them with the kind of equipment you got at that time.
Very true. It is a challenge at times, Alan, especially where I live. The nearest hospital is, again, this little community hospital, which is at the quickest 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
But you can't take a serious patient there. And the more advanced hospital is a half an hour away. So sometimes these volunteer EMTs, if the paramedic unit isn't available, which happens because there's only one of them, they're faced with then shifting to being the sole provider in the back of an ambulance for a half-hour ride, or if it's the snow, it could be an hour to the hospital. And the EMTs do have quite a bit of tools at their disposal and quite a bit of training, but you're talking about a very diverse work group. We have kids here that are 17 that are EMTs, and we have people in their 60s and 70s. So the small towns in the United States, there's a big lack of volunteers here in the United States. It's been a increasing problem, and even where I live, it's very rural. It's very upscale, like maybe I'll use that term. So a lot of the people from New York City have weekend houses out here, and they're actors or big, large, corporate business people that don't have the time to volunteer. There's no blue collar jobs in this county really. So everybody's an executive or retired artists, those sort of people. So a lot of people don't have the time to volunteer. So it's
Yeah.
becoming a challenge and some towns are now paying people to be in their stations, but even that's a challenge because the workforce is not there. So you could put a sign out, help wanted, and no one's going to answer it. Same with law enforcement. Even some of the fire services are beginning to see a little bit of a downtick in recruiting.
Yeah, we don't have, well, I don't believe we do, but we don't have that volunteer like sheriffs and police, and we have like probably volunteer fire people from our if there's disasters or fires who come in, SES, but we don't have volunteer police and that, so it's quite different to here. Do you think, like you said about the training in the in the outback areas to going to the city, that it's good for a paramedic or EMT to have, do both areas to help advance themselves and have understanding of them both areas for treating patients?
If I understand your question right,
Like,
where
just say the training of a paramedic or EMT, do you think it's good they might work in the rural areas like you, and then work in the city as well? Do you think it's best for them to get training in both areas? What helps them, their development grow?
Great observation, Alan. Great observation. Yes, what happens is when you're first trained, you have to go to a urban area, city. Like I said, I trained in Lower Manhattan, New York City, and you did a high volume of calls in a high risk area, and same happens now. You train in the larger cities, in the New Havens and the Bridgeports and the Hartfords and the Danburys, and then once you get your sea legs, if you will, as a paramedic, and you have a little bit of experience behind you, then they rotate you out. They're usually the same company. So like one service, a hospital service, let's say, has a paramedic unit in a urban area, as you described. Then they have an outpost, as you described, the outback, or
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
rural Connecticut. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have an outback, but if
Yeah.
we're Connecticut, I live in the outback,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so they put a paramedic out here, and he only does 1 or 2 calls a day. So there's skill retention is an issue. If you only stayed there, you wouldn't see a whole lot. And and it goes like you said with the when we started with the chaos thing. Um, you go from days, hours of calm and not much going on to sheer terror and chaos at the flip of a switch.
Mm.
So you have to adapt to that world. And these paramedics, today they're very highly trained. They have a ton of equipment. They carry all sorts of airway things and defibrillators and pacemakers, and they can do surgical airways. They can carry blood. They carry all sorts of medications to calm psychotic patients that are maybe having an episode and are violent.
Mm.
So it's changed since I started, as a paramedic, 40 something years, 43 years ago. But they do a good job. But that's a good observation. The cities and the country, two vastly different things. I don't have an interstate highway where I live, so we have
Mm.
very few car accidents. Where I worked for 40 years at a fire service was a large city of 90,000, and we had an airport and a lake and an interstate highway. And over my career there, I've seen every sort of emergency that you could envision.
Yeah. And the equipment change between the medicine and everything must be so much different and more advanced from when you started now, what you can help probably save a patient now to what was back then.
Oh, yeah, that's another a good observation. When I first started, um, the paramedics were the only ones that were allowed to defibrillate people.
Yeah.
And like Johnny and Roy on the emergency show, it was a manual. You had the paddles in your hand and you put them on a person's chest, and if you were lucky not to shock yourself or your partner, you could shock these people and hopefully get them back to life. But
Yeah.
nowadays, every airplane has a defibrillator, every mall has a defibrillator, every police car, every fire engine. And that's the one tool I would say in my tenure that makes a gigantic difference. If you had to wait for the paramedic to come from 3 towns away, to come defibrillate you because you're in cardiac arrest, you're not going to survive. But
Mm.
where I live, every one of these volunteer responders has a defibrillator in their car. I have one in each of my cars, so I can get there in 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it is, under that 6 minute time frame they talk about, and shock somebody, get them back to having a heartbeat. That was one of the large ones that's made a big difference. Epinephrine, people have EpiPens now.
Yeah.
One of my most terrifying calls when I was an EMT, when I was really young, was a girl at a college having an allergic reaction to Chinese food, and we didn't have that capability, and
Yeah.
only because we were driving really fast did we save her. But
Yeah.
that again, every mom whose kid has a peanut allergy has an EpiPen in her pocketbook.
Yeah.
So it's quite a difference. There's a lot more public ed, and people are more informed and capable.
And I suppose that goes to, like you said, the mental health and different mental health. To back then, the training wasn't understanding what you were, the scene you were going on, where the thoughts of it mightn't have been a person with mental health. You could have been been drunk or a head injury. And now the understanding of mental health and different mental health issues has helped that area as well when arriving at scenes.
That's another huge difference from then till now. When I started, when I was young, we had once in a while you had a call for a psych patient. Not that often. The substance abuse was a big difference back then as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But
Yeah.
the psych services now, the where I worked, the police department has an embedded clinician within the police department, to assist the police and EMS and fire with emotionally disturbed patients and substance abuse patients. It's that prevalent. Most of the ambulance services here, most EMS calls, they probably run somewhere between 25 and 35% of their call volume are psychological, emotional, substance abuse problems, which is a tremendous percentage. Uh, I've gone for advanced training myself. I was the first fire guy in Connecticut, my state, that went with the police department to have crisis intervention team training with the law enforcement. It's called CIT. I know they have it in Australia.
Yeah.
And the other one I took over here one of the first times, which came from down by you, was mental health first aid,
Yeah.
which was developed in New Zealand.
Yep.
That's where that program started, and that was interesting too. It's a much broader story, but to make it shorter, my own counselor challenged me to take that class. She was teaching it. I took the mental health first aid, and 2 nights later, I was on the roof of a 3-story house talking a young girl off of it and using those skills they taught us. And I called her. I said, "Hey, you know what? Your class worked." And so there's definitely a correlation between what we learn and what we do. But and the substance abuse things, getting back to that, the opioid crisis. When I first started as a paramedic in Lower Manhattan, um, if you went to a heroin overdose, it was the lower end of the population. They lived in the subway tunnels or in the streets. These people weren't employed. They were really struggling and had no jobs, those sort of things, and they couldn't get out of that. And then fast forward to today, where anyone you meet on the street could have an opioid problem.
Yeah.
A housewife, an athlete, airline pilot, a firefighter, a cop. You don't. They created this problem with the painkillers a couple of years ago, and then they scaled that back, and people turned to illicit means of drugs. And that's another thing. We all carry Narcan now. When I was working, I carried Narcan in my pocket. Even as a command fire officer, I administered it many times. All the police have it here, to the point where now it almost gets silly. You go on an overdose call, and 3 cops have shot Narcan in this poor kid's nose, and he really only needed one. But that's another. We save a lot of lives compared to
Yeah.
the old days when we didn't have that. And Narcan's been around, I want to say, since the late '70s. It was invented by DuPont here in Delaware, USA,
Yeah.
and everybody's got Narcan now. You don't even have to pay for it. Just go to the pharmacy or one of the groups, and they have dispensers here in the United States where you go to a
Yeah.
fire station, you can push the button and Narcan pops out and you take it home in case your family has a problem.
That's incredible. Excuse me. That's incredible. We don't have that here. Well, I don't think we do at this moment. But we haven't hit the fentanyl huge here. But that's a big risk now for, again, first responders when going to fentanyl, overdosed or touching fentanyl. Is what you hear online for someone like a first responder touching it. Can it affect you that fast? Is it true?
No, that's kind of a fallacy.
Yeah.
I just took some training last month when they brought that up. And you see a lot of YouTube videos with the police officers going into a drug situation, and they
Pass out or
got
something.
in, yeah, they passed out. And I've been to those calls. I've
Yeah.
Narcan cops myself. Um, is it possible? It probably is. But but it's not likely. We're
Yeah.
all trained to wear latex or non-latex gloves and be careful. Um, Fentanyl itself, if you have one of those patches that patients wear legitimately, it
Yeah.
it has to absorb through your skin. If somebody blew a cloud of fentanyl in your nose, yeah, of course you're going to be affected. But to think that if you touch it with your finger and you're going to pass out and have an overdose is probably not real accurate. There's 2 camps. Some of the law enforcement people say it's very possible, and some of the medical people say it's impossible.
Yeah.
I don't think it's impossible, and I don't think it's that prevalent. I think there's some some meeting in the middle somewhere. But the fentanyl's a huge problem because it's being manufactured all over the place, and it's very cheap to make, and then they mix it with whatever drug is people's fancy, whether it's marijuana or heroin or cocaine. They slip it in there, and it becomes a bigger problem. We had a incident here on the green in New Haven near Yale University where they had like 30 people in one day. They all were buying drugs from some guy, and it was all laced with fentanyl, and it had a mass casualty thing right on the green in New Haven.
And even with that, talking about the fentanyl and dangers for first responders, even now, just the dangers of, sometimes going to a situation where you got to be careful. You don't know the house you're entering. You don't know, of course, you don't know that, you know what you're going there for, but you don't know what's happening to that person completely. You got some details on the computer and radio it comes over, but again, you don't know what's around that person, what that person's mood is, or the people around that person at that stage. So your senses and spider senses has to be growing skills over that time as well.
Very, very true. I taught a class 2 days ago on the career firehouses in Connecticut, and there was a mental health class, and the counselor was kind of tiptoeing around responders being assaulted, as you're alluding to. And I kind of giggled, and she looked at me, and I looked at the crowd and said, "Who in the room hasn't been assaulted on a call?" And there wasn't one guy. I almost literally got killed 2 years ago on the interstate highway with a suicidal patient. Luckily, I have a partner. When I was in the chief's car in a pouring rain on the interstate highway, he tried to kill himself with a car crash, and then it didn't work. He started walking down the highway, and we went to stop him, and he went into a violent rage. And the two of us were wrestling there on the side of the road until four state troopers showed up and a Danbury police officer to subdue him. But we had to do all we can to keep him out of traffic. But he was 26 and I was 62. It wasn't exactly a fair fight. But they're really, I mean, in the United States, at least, if you've been an EMS worker for more than a year, you've been assaulted by some means, whether it's a psych patient, overdose patient, just somebody who's violent, or now we have, as we talked, a terrorist call. It's almost inevitable if you're a first responder that you're going to be assaulted at some point in time.
Yeah, and I suppose like you going to the terrorist cause now where, after something has happened and they allow you in, still the secondary thing is always on the minds of the first responders too, thinking there could be a second explosion or something after that. That mustn't be easy to be on your brain because one, I suppose you clicked on to go in, you're not thinking, but in the back of the head for people with families or kids, again, you have to override that on that day and that moment as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is probably where Australia and the United States have vastly different experiences.
Yes.
Everybody in the United States owns a gun.
Yeah.
Or multiple guns.
Yeah.
Or has access to guns, and they have high capacity, high powered guns. So we have a huge epidemic here with all, as you said, with these terrorist acts and school shootings and mass shootings and so forth, which I had said I had been to one.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to go there a bit later with you, but yes.
Yeah, we could go there later. But yes, the secondary devices and all that are very true. The first one that was the watershed here was Columbine high school shooting in Colorado. Yeah. And most people don't know that started as a dumpster fire. They set the dumpster on fire in the parking lot as the responders came, and then it turned into what it did. What they did do since then, we've taken a lot of training, is what they call rescue task force. So and you alluded to, you wait till it's cleared. We don't do that anymore. We all run in. So It's crazy dangerous. Like I said, I did it myself. It violates your basic training that if you were more than in the service for 5 years or so, you were taught wait until it's cleared. Now that doesn't happen anymore. So what they do with these rescue task forces, they team up a couple of hopefully heavily armed police officers with a couple of EMS people and a couple of firefighters, and the firefighters' jobs are to check for fire or for secondary devices. They're trained on how to, hazardous materials and devices and so forth. And then the EMS people and the fire guys treat the wounded and help to evacuate them while under cover by the police. And in fact, there was just training the last 2 days in the next town over where they did this at a school that's closed for the summer. Um, it's crazy that we have to train for this, but
Yeah.
it's the reality of the United States now.
Yeah.
And I don't. It won't be solved in my lifetime. Maybe a couple lifetimes from now, but
Yeah.
the and I'm neither really pro gun or anti gun. I like every other American. I own a couple of guns, but
Yeah.
um, I don't care. You could carry them if people have licenses to carry them, which I do as well, but I don't.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just unlike Australia where you don't have a gun issue,
No.
as far as I understand it.
No.
The United States is not as Australia is.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 1995, six, something around then. We had a big mass shooting at Port Arthur, what's in
Yeah,
Tasmania, and I think like 36, 28, something. I won't name a number because
35 people were killed.
35 people were killed. And we had, at that time, John Howard, who was our Prime Minister, who changed it. And of course, I think, like I said, I don't get into politics, as you said. It has helped. But again, I think in a lifetime, no one's going to solve the issue. But in any area, doctors, there's always going to be one bad person who ruins it. So I don't think you can actually totally fix something like that, just by doing one or two things.
No, no, it's a societal thing,
Yeah.
and it's a very hot topic politically here because there's people on both ends of the spectrum. Uh,
Yeah.
but I if I had to make an argument for it, I believe people should have the ability to defend themselves or their
Yep.
property. But I don't know as if you need an assault rifle to do so.
No.
I would think a shotgun or a handgun would protect you
Yeah.
from the errant intruder. But
Yeah.
I mean, there are people here that literally have arsenals, and the police, in response, they had a watershed moment in Florida where some FBI agents were outgunned by some bad guys, and they had revolvers. And then so the FBI went to automatic weapons, and even as silly things like having strings on your glasses in case you hit the deck and you don't lose your glasses. And now
Yeah.
most police departments have armored vehicles to move in on these things, and all sorts
Yeah.
of tactical training and equipment. So it's a sad commentary, but it's necessary here.
I know, like I said, as I said, I think as you know, it always can just take one person to ruin something. And there's not a problem what's going to be solved in a lifetime, like you said. We just sadly had a mass uh, stabbing in Bondi just a while back, just before Christmas, where so many were injured.
Shooting.
There was a stabbing in Bondi. Shooting. Sorry. Yeah, Jacob. Yeah, Jacob.
Gun.
Sorry, Jacob. You're right. Sorry. No, I'm getting it wrong. And do you know how many were shot, mate? He'll look that up. That's what we're starting to do. Yeah. Yeah. So it was terrible. Sorry, I should say shooting. I don't know why I got that wrong. But yeah, it was terrible. And, again, first responders, you were turning up and the shots were still happening basically when they were arriving and police trying to save people. And
Yeah, that's what's happening here.
yeah, it was 11 people killed.
Yeah, that's terrible.
A shot on Bondi. So that's
Yeah.
just the numbers right. So I just make sure.
Even our EMS and fire people, a lot of them are outfitted with ballistic equipment.
Yeah.
So, if you had asked me 30, 40, 25 years ago, what do you think about EMS or fire people wearing bulletproof vests or armor? I would say you're out of your mind. And now you could open a box, a cupboard on an ambulance and it's loaded with ballistic helmets and 2A level vests.
Yeah.
But it's where we're at.
Okay. No, it's terrible. And we'll move on a little bit. These tragic events. I know one of the first, hopefully I'll get it right, one of the worst tragic events, get my words back, was the Bridgeport building, fell or something like that. Is that true?
It's true. I was very young paramedic. There was another what do they call that? I want to say watershed again because I had it twice already, I think. But
Yeah.
beachhead incident
Yeah.
where they were building a apartment house. I think it was 12 stories maybe in Bridgeport, and they used this technique called lift slab. So what they would do is they would pour the concrete floor, and then with jacks lift it up to the top floor, and then they do the next floor, the next floor, the next floor. So they were doing this, and one of the jacks got out of kilter, and the whole building under construction fell. And there were 3 dozen people, construction workers, in and around the building. Uh, Most of them were trapped. 29 of them died. Um, I was, like I said, I worked in that city and mostly in the town next door as a paramedic, and I'd just gotten hired by Danbury, which is a half hour north. And there wasn't a lot of paramedics then, nor were there a lot of technical rescue teams. And I had done some training back then with a group, and I spent 4 nights there out of 8 that they recovered people, but most of these people had no chance of survival because the place just pancaked down on top of everybody. So then they banned that construction process here, so you can't do that anymore. And but that was another Connecticut disaster. All these states have their newsworthy disasters. That was one of the big ones here, and I happened to
Yeah.
be there because I was, a part of that response area. But and over the course of the 8 days, there was a couple of thousand responders there, and the one good thing that came out of it was that was prior to anybody really knowing anything about mental health for
Yeah.
responders or peer support. And they brought up this Dr. Jeff Mitchell from the University of Maryland to do some training, and I was one of 12 people that got trained. No one even wanted to be bothered, but the 12 of us that took that training saw the efficacy of it, and we started a statewide team, a critical incident stress debriefing team, to go and help people through their own critical incidents, first responders. And I was very active with those guys for probably 10 or 15 years, and I did hundreds, probably better than 400 responses as a peer helper at all sorts of, from police officers being shot to building collapses, children dying in fires. So it was quite the ride for quite a while.
And it's, like you said, that's a, some time back now, but it still took a long time to get there to understand mental health, from our soldiers coming back from war. And I know your dad, I think, was a Marine in the Korean War. And, going all back to that stage and soldiers coming back, it showed, how long it's just taking us to get used to mental health, then allow people to understand it can help and it does work.
Very keen observation, Alan. Yeah, my dad was a Korean War Marine. He was wounded in North Korea.
Mm.
He never talked about it.
Mm.
And when I became a young firefighter paramedic and I'd go to like these bad calls in my hometown, uh, I knew he knew, but he would never talk about it. He would,
Mm.
and I was probably maybe 20 or something. And I had like my first little meltdown. And the only thing he ever said was, I know where you're coming from, and I know about this, but I don't know what to do.
Mm.
Because he said, I remember the medics in the Marine Corps, and that's what you remind me of. And I'm like, okay, but he didn't, he couldn't offer any advice or anything. He never went for help or that sort of thing. And then after the building collapse, it became pretty painfully apparent that, people needed help. Because by then I had been in EMS for 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And I had had my share of tragedies by then. And it really, it resonated with me. And we went to a couple of conferences down in Baltimore and DC, Washington, DC, and other places, and met people with a similar mindset that were experienced responders, but said, "Hey, you know what? This is taking its toll." So I had a couple of really great mentors back then that were in this field. One is I'm still very friendly with. He was in a state police EAP unit, employees assistance, and that stuck with me. I did a lot of education. I went to a lot of training. After like I said, after about 10 or 15 years of that, and I had been to probably 40 line of duty deaths between fire, police, and EMS, and even correction officers. I went to a prison where a guard had been killed. Um, and then I snuck out of it. I just kind of faded away from that for a while. I needed a break. And then after the Sandy Hook thing, I got dragged back into it. On a couple of different levels, both personally with a journey of counseling, and then that took me into another peer helping mission, if you will, to help others.
Yeah. Excuse me. Going back to your dad, this is, I suppose, not just something once I heard, like you went to your dad and he said he couldn't say too much. And a story I heard once, hopefully it doesn't sound so winded, but there was a guy, he fell down a hole and he's there and he's trapped and it's black, and a priest walks past and he says to the priest, "Can you help me out? Can you help me out?" And the priest says, "Oh, son, I'm going to pray for you." And he walked away. He said, "Well, that's not going to help me." And next minute, his doctor walked past and he said to the doctor, "Doctor, I'm so dark. I'm lost. Can you help me?" And the doctor wrote a script and dropped it down. He said, "Well, this is not going to help me." And next minute, one of his mates walked past and he said, "Mate, I'm down a dark hole." And his mate jumped down the dark hole and said, "Hey, I've been down here before. I'll show you the way out." So I think, what you're doing, the peer training and understanding of others who have been through it, that really does help, if that story made sense there.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Actually, it's very similar to the story I use. I liken the peer helpers to, we've all seen the movie Bugs Bunny or any of these movies where the little wooden rope slatted bridge is across the big canyon in the jungle. And you start across that bridge, it gets all shaky and the boards fall off, you run back. So if you liken that to, you're on one side of that canyon and help is on the other side. And every time you start across that rickety wooden bridge, it starts to shake and you run back to, where you think you're safe. And then one of these peer helpers comes along and says, as you just said, "Hey, mate, follow me. I know the way and I'll get you over there." So you walk across the bridge with them to get some help. So that's what the peer helpers do. The peer helpers and a really good mental health worker that works with emergency responders, they don't really have the answers. They just find the answers in the room that already exist. So I had written an article for one of the magazines here a while ago about coming out of the fog of EMS. And sometimes you just need to reset your values or your system and take a deep breath and see what's about you.
And excuse me, I've heard you say in other podcasts, and I've listened to you before, when you have walked into counselors or psychiatrists and they have no understanding, is you just walk out. It's not worth it. One, you don't want them to hear your stories, and two, that they're not going to be able to help you.
Well, and three, Alan, is you don't want to affect them vicariously.
Yeah.
I had a very bad experience with a counselor. I went to one counselor for a while, and she was religious based, which I'm not religious based.
Yeah.
But she was nice enough, and it gave me an excuse to tell my friends I was seeing somebody. She retired and handed me off to one of her colleagues who was completely inappropriate. And there's no way I could have told either of these people certain stories without affecting them. And and first responders are helpers. They don't want to inflict pain and damage on people. So if you wind up trying to talk to somebody who isn't up to par with listening to your story, you're not going to do it. I'm not going to talk to you about, dead children or things like that if you've never even seen one. So what you're
Yeah.
seeing now are some of these responders going off to the universities and getting degrees in counseling. So they're wearing two hats. They were a first responder, and then they get the didactic training from the university. So they become what we call here is trauma informed. And whenever I meet a new or hear about a new counselor in the area, I go vet them out myself and say, "Hey, Alan, I'm Bernie. What's going on?" "Oh, I was a paramedic. And now I'm a counselor." "All right, cool." And then I probably refer. It's a little bit late, last 2, 3 months, a little quiet, but I probably refer 4 or 5 people a month for help. And from help, sometimes just like, "Hey, dude, take a day off and go to the beach and reset to you need to go to a counselor. I'll bring you to them, or you need to go to rehab. You got some big problems." Um, but that's what the peer helpers are there for. We've been there, we've done it. As you said, we'll get you out of the hole here. To your friend, but it it's gotten complicated. But at least there's help available. We have a network of mental health professionals near where I live, which has
Yeah.
been growing quite steadily.
Mm.
One of my counselor at the time, she's one of the lead people with them, and her husband is a fire captain. And I refer to him as patient zero with this group because he was at a big fire with a bunch of fatalities, and they started with that fire that he was at, and then I'm like patient one because I was the next one after the Sandy Hook thing occurred not long after that fire. But
Yeah.
we have help
If
now, which is great.
Yeah, soon I might actually talk a little bit about the Sandy Hook event, if you don't mind. But I think what you're saying too with that peer help, the percentage of first responders whose families break up, and then just it causes, I suppose, genetic, family breakups down the track too. And, as you said, you can't take it home to your family. And what can, break up, first responders.
That again, keen observation. A lot of law enforcement groups have divorce rates in the 90 percentages. EMS is probably off the scale as well. Firefighters, not so much because they have their own little social fabric within a fire station, so they're
Yeah.
able to debrief each other before they go home. But yeah, if your wife, you're a firefighter paramedic, and your wife teaches Sunday school, and the worst thing that happens to there is the ink runs out of her pen, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you come home, you can't talk to her about, "I was just at a car accident where 6 people were killed."
Yeah.
So, and then they don't think that you love them because you won't tell them your story, but you do because you don't want to vicarious traumatize them. So it's very, very difficult to maintain those kind of personal relationships at times. But they're helping with that. They have spousal academies where they try to teach the spouses what the first responder does. But yeah, it's a difficult equation at best.
And even looking at what happened with the Twin Towers, that's been probably now, a long-lasting thing for, first responders who's got diseases from what happened there with the buildings and the
Oh yeah.
everything with the buildings. And then, all the children who lost parents early on, like you saying that, you lost, I think, a great uncle and things like that. That just sometimes doesn't affect that generation. It can affect generations right down the track.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the World Trade Center, New York City is 60 miles away.
Yeah,
We were mobilized in this area to get ready to go. And one of my very close friends who I worked here as a paramedic was a New York City firefighter full time. He was killed.
yeah,
So his 3 kids, one son's now a New York City firefighter, And one's a nurse and one's a police officer here in Connecticut. And I see her every so often. They're great kids carrying on a legacy for their family. But no, you can't forget those things. And where I live, it was, there's all sorts of people that were affected by that because it's not that far away and people commute to that area.
And it's just not that day with people who have had first responders and fire officers who have had cancer and different things like that. So the day hasn't
Yep.
been just forgotten, and it hasn't stopped. It's in
Nope.
the cost of how many first responders died in that day it doesn't get it talked about. There's more now who have been lost because of that day than just that day.
Oh, absolutely. One other friend of mine was a police officer from right nearby here, and they went down and he got sick and he subsequently died from the cancer caused by the debris. But yeah, no, you're absolutely correct.
Moving on to one of the hardest days in your life with the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Uh, I don't want to go into deep because I just want you to go into it as much as you can because I haven't talked to anyone who was there on that day. Can you tell me a little bit about that day and what you wish to speak about, what happened on the day?
Sure, we can talk about some things there. Now of course it's a long time ago now, which
Yeah,
is it's kind of hard to understand because it seems like it was yesterday. But
yeah.
Newtown, where I grew up, where Sandy Hook is a village in Newtown, and it's 20,000 people or so in that town, and very small, close knit community. And I live not far away, through the woods to where the center of Sandy Hook is 10 or 12 minutes away from where I live. So no one, the problem with them, with those events then, where people didn't really expect that to occur and you didn't expect it to happen here. So when it happened, it took everybody off guard. And, the town in Newtown, they only have 4 or 5 cops working. There's state police that maybe could add another half dozen from nearby. So you don't have a large immediate law enforcement response. And, you know, the shooter was a kid with profound mental health issues whose mother had taken him to the gun range and taught him how to use a gun. And she was his first victim. And then he went to the school and did his thing. And I'm was not far away. Uh, I got there very early on when they were screaming for help, and there was no one actually taking a lead role from the EMS end. The town there only has 2 ambulances, and they were picked up a victim each and went to the hospital. So there's no one left, and I know everybody in the Sandy Hook Fire Department, literally every single member. And when I pulled up to the firehouse, there was only a very small number of people there, and they said, "We need your help up the road." The school was behind the firehouse, which is a really odd setup, about 500 feet up the street. And two of my coworkers, the supervisors, the paramedics, they had showed up uh, in their response vehicles, and I went over to them, and they're like, "Well, let's go over here." And then somebody yelled, "Get those guys up to the school," because we are the only paramedics on the scene. So it was still very active when we got up to the front of the school. Kids were still running away, and teachers, and uh, we got up right towards the front of the school, and it was still total chaos. And we were hunkered down behind a car because, like I said, it was still very active, and we had no idea what was going on. And a state police sergeant, who I know very well since many years, he came up behind us with his gun out and said, "You guys, let's go. Follow me. We're going in." And I was like, "What? This is again." At that time, it was kind of against your training and instinct, but here's this guy we all trust and care about. Let's go. So we ran in to the school, and we actually formed up at just on the side of the school by the door and met up with 3 or 4 other cops, and we developed that rescue task force, if you will, that exists now in about 9 seconds in 2012. It happened organically, and we went in and found what we found. Um,
Mm.
but uh, you know, it changed everything. It was it was difficult to understand even in real time what was going on. The three paramedics were very close. We've been paramedics together our whole lives, for the most part. So there was at least in my mind, a tremendous level of trust, and we stayed together the whole time. And we made there was nothing anyone could do for anybody. That's,
Yeah.
the mystery might be with some people, why couldn't you help anybody? Because you couldn't.
Mm.
This was more of a mass execution than a mass shooting spraying into a crowd at a
Yeah.
concert.
Yeah.
And these were little children.
Yeah.
So it was, from that standpoint, it was difficult. And, by the time, as time caught up with us, there was 200 cops on the scene and SWAT teams from the state police and the FBI. But it was too little too late by then. The
Mm.
shooter had shot himself, and,
Mm.
it was over. They didn't know if there was another one, so they had to search, and they had to hunker us down inside the building to search again. And I was totally confident that, these cops, I knew these cops, I
Mm.
literally knew all of them, and they were protecting us with their weapons. So that wasn't an issue. But, knowing what was going on outside with the news media and helicopters and the parents, and, this school, I think, held 400 or 500 kids, and they took care of all the parents to the firehouse. And when, at the end of the day, when your kid didn't show up, it was kind of apparent what had happened. So, and the governor was the one who told them what had happened. So, it was very profoundly sad. But
Mm.
and that village of Sandy Hook became besieged is probably the best word for the next couple of months. People were
Yeah.
dropping off flowers and teddy bears, and there were so many teddy bears dropped off by the truckload that and I can remember being at work, 2 towns away in Danbury, when people would call, "Hey, I got a truckload of teddy bears from Pennsylvania, and Newtown won't take them. And I'm like, I don't have any capability to take a truckload of teddy bears. So they actually had a warehouse full of teddy bears, and when they rebuilt the school, they ground them up
Oh.
in like a chipper and mixed it with dirt and made angel dirt or whatever you want to call it to rebuild the school. So
Mm.
within the school and grounds, there's I would say 100,000 teddy bears that were
Oh.
were ground up, which a lot of people don't
I never
realize
knew
that.
that.
But
No.
yeah, and
That's
there was truckloads of mail and cards, and at one point they gave me a box of the cards, and it was unbelievable to read. People send in well wishes and stuff. But it affect that community will not be the same for 4 generations.
no.
It's just not.
That's where I talk about generations and trauma for generations time. I won't. And the thought and just the that area and that be known for that shooting. It won't be known for the best honey. It's known for that tragic shooting. What always gives a name to that town as well. It's terrible.
Yeah, and that's kind of the weird thing that happened to me is, um, subsequent to that, I went to a lot of training and a lot of speeches and talks and podcasts, as you've listened to. So I've met people from probably 2 dozen of these other incidents, um, because you're sadly, really tragically, a member of this club.
Yeah.
So whether, I met one of the guys from the Las Vegas shooting, and we hit it off in 2 seconds because we were trauma buddies. He
Yep.
was a baseball player that rescued a bunch of people,
Yes, I just listened to that
and
podcast. Yeah.
yeah, he's unbelievable. He's on a crusade to help everybody. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Todd is, and and then I met the people from Colorado and Wisconsin and Florida. I mean, pretty much everywhere. And it's a terrible club to belong to, and I don't wish that upon anybody. But
Yeah.
when you listen to some of these people I've met were actually shot multiple
Yeah.
times and survived.
Yeah.
Um, it's really tragic, but there are dozens of these people out there now, including me and our guys here.
Mm.
So, like I said, it'd be nice if it could stop, but I don't think in my lifetime we're going to see it in
No.
every day. There was another one today, I think, in Midland, Texas.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's weekly at the very least.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know about daily hearing essays, but it's at least weekly.
Mm.
Um, and I said that within the last few hours there was one in Texas.
Well,
But
I don't. Sorry, I
go
don't know
ahead.
if you know
No, go.
this story, but I was with not being able to see. I listen to a lot of newses and everything, but there's two girls who have been charged somewhere in America who idolized that person who did go into Sandy Hook School, and they were going to kill one of their fellow school fellows because they believed he looked like that child, but she was in love with him and she thought he would come back to her. I don't know if you heard that story, but that's
I
out.
didn't hear that one. No,
No. And so,
that's kind of profoundly odd.
yeah, it is. That's what I mean. Mental health, the reason, I mean, that's not normal. It just shows, and I think they're only 13 years old. So,
Yeah,
just
that's
that,
crazy.
mental health area just shows what
And
happened.
that kid from that incident, I don't even think was capable of verbal speech.
No.
I think he was profoundly handicapped and
Yeah.
couldn't even talk.
Yeah. And
So,
the,
these kids now, this is, what is this, 13 years ago,
yeah.
14 years ago. So
Yeah.
what could a 12-year-old know from that?
And then when you look at kids who still idolize, like you said, the Columbine thing, and kids who have posters on the wall and things like that. It's just I, I just don't know. Again, we're talking about guns, how to stop that as well to idolize these people.
Yeah, it's a mental health issue is what it is.
Just
You
going
know,
to that day again. Thank you for talking about it. Like I said, I know you've been probably asked that, been asked that a million times and go over it. And
actually, that if I may,
yeah.
that the exact opposite.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
only one person besides the police and my counselor, only one other person ever asked me what really happened in there because it's so toxic and so
Yeah.
radioactive. A, I wouldn't tell them, but
No.
B, no one wants to hear it.
No, but just even that small outline of it, I really appreciate you to go through that.
Oh, no problem.
No, and I really appreciate that. And I heard on, like I said, I think you said it was Todd you were interviewing. He was interviewing you, and you said that the chief on that day was really good. He knew to get you out of there. He knew that he wanted to get you home, and he really looked after you that day, knowing what the signs were to say, mate, you need to get out of here.
Yeah, well, and sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But I grew up with him since I joined the fire department in that town. He was the chief of Sandy Hook, so
Mm.
so we had a very close relationship. I literally just saw his daughter, who's a fire captain, a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
So, um, and when we got back to the firehouse, again, the firehouse is in front of the school. My car was blocked by the police cars. And when I got down there was all kinds of confusion. And he grabbed me, put me in his office, and he said, "Get in here." And then somebody wanted to talk, and he said, "Get away from him." And then he said, "We got to get you out of here." And I'm like, "Great." And the governor's police detail were blocking my car, and I said, "Dude, you got to move. I got to go." But yeah, he was one of my mentors for many years, and sadly he passed away, and that incident took a tremendous toll on him because his he had family in that school. All of his friends worked around that school. It was part of to this day, the firehouse has stars on the roof, and you literally drive through the parking lot of the firehouse to go to the new school, and the old school was the same way. But Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was that was an interesting piece of information there.
I don't know how to explain this, but as you said, you only told a couple of people whatever happened in there, but that in every trauma that first responders go to must be so hard because you're not going at the end, like when everything's cleaned up. You could be at the start when something's going to happen, but you're in the middle of the explosion, if that makes sense. You're there when the explosion's happening. You're still in it where people are in pain or people are dying. It's a big difference if you were at the end, maybe coming in, checking out and seeing what happened, for forensics after or before it. But being in that explosion must be a lot harder to understand and get over, if that makes any sense what I just said.
It does make some sense. I'm not sure I'm going to be expert at answering it. I think, the first responders, especially paramedics, you're trained to see, and fire service, especially too, you're trained to witness what you're witnessing and then formulate a solution or strategies and tactics to manage that emergency. And the fire service, as a chief fire officer, I was trained to bring calm from the chaos. Slow everything down, set up a plan, set up teams and command structures. Uh, Paramedics vastly different because you're usually alone or maybe a small team. And the problem there at Sandy Hook was uh, I didn't have any baseline knowledge. I didn't have a video in my head of a previous one of these. We were ad-libbing, if you will, or trying to figure out as we went. I've been to, I don't know, 3,000 cardiac arrests. It's routine. I know what to do. Do the airway, do the breathing, do the circulation, all those sort of things. In this situation, we violated everything from the beginning with running into the building with the cops that was outside of my experience and level of training at the time. So you're adapting in faster than real time. And are you afraid? You better be. But, you know, I'm relying on these cops to protect me. I'm not armed. They're armed. I like I told one of the podcasters, when going down the hallway, one of the Newtown cops who's 6 inches taller than me literally had his rifle resting across my shoulders as we went down the hallway. He was going to die for me if it came to that. So you're afraid. You don't know what you're walking into a complete unknown situation, but you're surrounded by people that are highly trained and you trust. The other two paramedics, we all kind of grew up together, and we know we can get through what we're seeing or try to put it all together later, at least from an emotional and mental health aspect. But in those, that where that chaos is occurring, as you said, the explosion,
Yeah.
uh, you know, if you're brand new, it'd be really tough. And that was part of the problem there. The three of us stayed in that school for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And I've been asked in the past, why didn't you get relief? Because same in Bridgeport, I was on the pile there for 4 nights in a row, and the same sort of question came up. And when you're a paramedic or when you're highly experienced, you're kind of at the apex of your career. So would I want to say, okay, I've had enough here, send the next person in who's been a paramedic for 2 years and we're going to ruin their career or their emotional stability or well-being, let's say. So, from a triage standpoint to overexpose 3 paramedics rather than 20 paramedics, retrospectively, it makes some sense. In the heat of the moment, people think you're still going to save people. It might not make a whole lot of sense. But looking back, a lot of the police officers retired after that incident, from PTSD and trauma, so forth.
Mm.
And I actually said to the other 3 paramedics that day, the other 2 paramedics that day, I said, "See all those cops out there? Half of them be gone in a year or so." And I was right because I had a little bit of a knowledge of what PTSD and trauma was going to do, and that's what happened. They were profoundly affected, and they retired. So
I, yeah, I
go ahead.
think you, yeah, no, I think you explained, I think you got my thoughts about that explosion. I think you said the best thing is when you have had that training experience, you got to slow down. It's, you got to think. It brings you back to that years of training, all them hundreds of hours of training, been to situations before. I think you explained that perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing about the trauma, if you don't mind me going to, I heard you did say that even sitting on a small chair, like a kid's chair, sometimes you can get goosebumps. That's even just a thought going back to it. Is that true? Is that what you said once?
Sure, there are all kinds of triggers
Yeah.
that get people, and it doesn't have to be just that. I mean,
Yeah.
another trick, like one of the triggers I have, which may sound kind of silly to some
No.
people, but if I go to a line of duty funeral and I hear the bagpipes, playing at the funeral, Amazing Grace, instantly get
Mm,
goosebumps.
mm,
It's a physical reaction to stress.
mm,
Uh, I, you can't make yourself get goosebumps, but if I hear the piper playing Amazing Grace, just roll up my sleeve and I go, oh wow, he's not kidding. And the little chairs, yeah, because like I just said, we were there for 8 hours inside the school, and I don't have kids, so I don't spend, other than a fire alarm, no time in a school with little kids. And we had to sit for hours waiting for them to decide what we're going to do, and we sat in those little chairs. So I found myself out a couple of years ago at a fire alarm, and I took a wrong turn in one of the schools at work and wound up in one of those rooms with the little chairs. And I instantly started reacting. I told one of my, get me out of here. I got it. Now I'm not coming apart, but it just
no.
rings bells in your head.
Yeah.
That I've experienced this before, and it wasn't cool.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. No, it just shows like even talking to people who might have been to situations or war before, even a smell and that. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be the smallest thing what can
Correct.
trigger that feeling. Often I heard
Yeah.
you spoke about that before. We're getting there, and I really appreciate you, like I said, taking your time and going through all of that. And hopefully you've been enjoying my questions and what I've asked you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. This is good.
One thing, well, like I said, coming down to the end, one thing I want to talk to you about paramedics or, fire officers, but paramedics going to houses and, seeing patients. You have to learn to have no judgment. It's very hard where you could go to a rundown house, $1 million house. The person could be treating you wrong, you know, race, whatever. You're walking into someone's worst day, but you need to, handle yourself responsibly, what you're there for, not judging. And I suppose that's hard. It can weed out a few people early on.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, you're there to be a professional, whether you're a volunteer or paid. You have to maintain decorum. It's very difficult at time.
Mm,
Especially if you're getting assaulted or physically assaulted. Um, you know, uh, Law enforcement has a lot of trouble with this because they always get accused of excessive force and so forth. Um, for the most part in the United States, EMS and fire people are unarmed.
mm,
But we've been shot at, we've been beaten, we've been stabbed, you name it. Uh, Verbally abused on a regular basis.
mm,
And you just have to say, okay. And sometimes, I've been doing it a long time, so I'm pretty resilient. But when you reach my threshold, which is very high compared to most people, all bets are off. And I can
yeah.
remember a woman abusing us here in the woods, had dislocated her shoulder or something, and she was just obnoxious. And she was abusing the other EMTs, and she was screaming and making demands. And I finally said, ma'am, you have two choices: knock it off, or we're going to leave you here. It's That's simple. We cannot put up with your abuse while we're trying to help you. All these people are impatient with you. You got to stop. And she finally got the message, and we got her out of the woods. But you
Mm.
know, it's not always easy, as you intimate. It tries your patience at best.
Yeah, and where I mean, even bias maybe going to someone who, sadly is about, a bad drug addict, sorry, and going to help them, or they don't want you to help them, as you say, or you know, some people might I think, oh, you're a drug addict, you're not worth it, but you really have to have no bias, and you see everything.
Yeah, you do, and I don't think I don't think it's possible to really maintain a bias in
Yeah,
emergency services because there are jerks of all flavors,
yeah,
and stations in life. So
yeah,
to think that you could have a bias because you don't like this group of people, and it just I don't think that's possible anymore. I mean, like I said, jerks coming off all flavors,
yeah.
and you just have to weed your way through them.
Yeah, no, that's great. Like I said, we're nearly there. One other thing, I suppose, well, we call it triple over here, a triple O over here, our emergency line, but your 911, that must have changed over times to help you too, with a little bit more information, plus their training to help someone before you get there.
Yeah, well, good point. Our 911 dispatchers are very highly trained, and they have programs and scripts to provide pre-arrival instructions, and they can clear people from having choking incidents and heart conditions and so forth. They give us a lot of information. We all have apps on our phones or our iPads to give us further information. Um, but what's happening, 911 or triple O, whatever you use in Australia,
Yep.
um, they they're getting abused as well.
Yeah.
My one of my key sayings is when you run out of answers, you call the fire department. So the fire department, we don't just go to fires. We get cats out of trees and help grandma pick up her chair because there's no one around, to move her chair. They call 911. I need help. We go, and I went last winter. A lady called 911 because the guy didn't show up to plow her driveway in the snow. So I went, and we were being on customer service. I called a friend. Hey,
Yep.
can you come with your snow plow and plow the lady's driveway? Sure. We just solve problems. We see problems, we solve them. But the dispatchers are crucial, and I don't know how they maintain their composure sometimes because people call, what time are the fireworks tonight? What time does the landfill open? And in the midst of other people getting shot and buildings burning down and all the radio traffic. But yeah,
Mm.
that's an interesting point too, Alan.
And even the trauma of when, like, the school shooting happened, you went to, and 9/11, hearing that and hearing, voices, knowing they're going to die as well, maybe being the last person to speak to is,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
they have tremendous trust,
yeah,
tremendous stress.
yeah,
They are oftentimes hearing the person saying, he's got a gun, he's going to shoot me, and that's the last person he talked to, or I can't save the person from drowning, or it's very stressful on the dispatchers, and we include them in a lot of the mental health stuff and peer
yeah,
helping,
yeah.
therapy dogs that go visit the dispatch centers.
As I said, I forgot at the start. If you don't mind, I've got my last couple of questions, and appreciate your time. And I know it's much later over there than it's here.
It's okay.
What I forgot to do at the start, because I wanted to talk about that show Emergency, what I loved so much, and I'm pleased you liked it. I got three questions. I got top, middle, or bottom. Which one would you like?
Hmm. I'll take the bottom.
Okay. As I said, I'm going to actually remember it. I have remembered every question, and the question is the one you have picked. If you could go back to the past as far as you could go back, or go forward to the future, where would you go and why?
I'd probably go back to the past and maybe pay attention to a couple of different things more so than I did. I had a very good career. I was promoted numerous times in the fire service. A very storied career as a paramedic. Uh, but I might have done things a little bit different.
Yeah.
If retrospectively applying the future to the past, we both make a lot of money on some of the inventions we would have known about. But I I think I would have paid closer attention to mental health at an earlier age for everybody, and technology. Paid better attention to technology then than now. It's an integral part of everything. But there was times when even going to paramedic school, I did not want to go to paramedic school. My boss forced me to go. I thought it was silly. I thought it was just a TV show. Um, but maybe I would have had a different attitude knowing what I know now.
Thank you. Next one would be if any of your friends or people you actually know, and if you have enjoyed this podcast and whichever area they're in, who would you say you could refer me to and say you enjoyed the interview if you have, and it's respectful and you felt relaxed? Who would you pick to come on?
Well, I'd have to. I talked to Todd Blyleven,
Yep.
the baseball player. He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's so many people though.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and you're doing quite a service over there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting to bridge the cultures
Yes.
from United States to Australia. I don't know. That's a profound question.
No, that's good. I would enjoy the interview you had with Todd. Going on to someone really famous, if my podcast can grow to be able to have anyone on, someone you would always have liked in any area, sport, TV, movies, book. Who would you love to hear on my podcast?
If I had any choice in the whole world, I think I would probably say Condoleezza Rice,
Okay.
who was the Secretary of State, and
Yeah. Yep.
again, somebody that would understand the cultures and the political divisions of the two countries.
Yeah. And I
And
believe she
she's
was a good violin player or something like that too, wasn't she?
unbelievably talented
Yes.
in everything she did.
Yeah.
But yeah, that if I had to choose one, I've always been a big fan of her.
Okay. So what's I know you're at retirement now. What's for in the next few years for Bernie? What's your thoughts and what are you going to be doing?
I'm actually enjoying retirement a lot more than I thought I would. I thought
Yeah.
I'd be, I was very active where I worked. Great guys, great equipment, a great city, a very diverse city, with various cultures that I thrived in. But I'm enjoying doing what I want to do. Being on your podcast, I was on another podcast the other day with a friend. Uh, I'm still a big volunteer responder, and I'm doing some educational things, some charity things, uh, but I'm able to relax. That's the difference. Now, I don't care how long you want to talk. If we want to stay on after the recording,
Yeah, I might for a few
I don't
minutes.
think
Yeah, for
I don't have
sure.
to go anywhere till tomorrow night. I have a ball to go to for one of the volunteer firehouses, but
Excellent.
that's a nice thing. I don't have to get up and go to work. My
Yeah.
pension allows for me to live comfortably, which is one of the perks for being in a fire service. So, but see where it goes.
Yeah. Bernie, we'll talk after the podcast. Uh, Thanks again for taking your time to come on, and you accepted so fast. I think it's probably one of the things you probably have said when you entered someone's house when they've been sick or before. How can I help you today? And that's the first thing you said in the email back to you. How can I help you? And that was amazing. You got back to me straight away, and I respected that. And again, taking your time to come on today. Thank you.
No
Thanks.
problem. I'm honored.
Thanks to Jacob again with helping with that research. That's why it's great to have him part of it now. And I know Jacob was really interested in hearing you today. But
Thanks, Jacob.
You again, I hope everything stays safe for you, and hopefully we might even have you back on to talk about other areas of first responders.
Anytime, Alan. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Lewis Raw Conversation, where every voice has a story.